All right, friends, we are back for your favorite podcast show of the week. It's Location Weekly. It's episode number 550, and we're recording live on January the 4th. It's a new year. It's a new day, and we're still in COVID, but that's okay. We'll get through it. We will get through it. How are you, Abriana?
I'm good. I think you put it right. New year, same old stuff. Everybody's dealing with, it seems like. So I'm good. I had a nice new year, saw a little bit of family, which was nice, even though it was different and low key, obviously. And it's really cold here. Like, I don't know, there's no snow and it's beautiful and clear, but it is really cold. I think it was like 18 this morning, feels like 6 degrees. So that's pretty frigid for these Atlanta transplants here in New York. But yeah, we're good. We're just going through the same stuff that everybody else is going through, virtual schooling, trying to get back in the year, trying to stay on top of what's happening at CES and all that good stuff. So
Yeah, it's. I wonder what like the attendance at CES is like this year. Like if people are actually there. You know.
I think people are there, but there was a lot of people I know, like even from my company and friends that I knew that were attending that of course backed out at the last minute. So pretty similar, nobody wants to be going to Vegas and being sick. That's like a place you need a lot of energy to be. So I think
Yeah.
everybody's trying to do things, we can hope for next year again.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, well let's jump into our show for this week. We have four stories as usual. Some interesting things, I think, this week. I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, well, if you remember last week, well, not last week, but the week before we did our predictions, we had talked about Apple Wallet being, incorporated into Hyatt with their hotel room keys. And we were saying, this is good. This is great. Like, we're glad Hyatt's doing this. It's, but we really wanted to see more real world applications here for those more like friction points like TSA. Well, asked and answered. Obviously, they were working on this well before we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. But according to Secure Technology Alliance, TSA is planning on supporting Apple Wallet IDs in airports. They're going to start with two different airports next month in February. And if it's successful, they're going to roll that out and expand to two more states, the following month and kind of, expand upon that. But besides the privately run TSA programs like Clear, Apple Wallet is really the first digital ID that TSA is going to accept. And they're saying they're going to expand this to other platforms. I would expect that, Google Wallet, what's available there, maybe Samsung Pay, something like that will start to be incorporated in the future as well. But basically the way that it's going to work is rather than the TSA staff examining a physical ID card or, like a driver's license, and manually comparing that to the traveler's ID photo and their face and verifying the flight information, all those things, where you scan your QR code. Now you're going to have a more automated process. So you'll just simply tag that, use the NFC reader or the QR scanner to validate that. So they'll still have, a TSA rep like verifying and kind of overseeing that. They'll still be present to validate that the verification went through, but it will just speed things up a little bit more seamlessly and perhaps even be a more secure option than a human eye perhaps. So last year Apple had said that it was expanding Apple Wallet to other cover conventional ID cards like the state driver's license, but that which are encrypted and then stored as part of the process. But this obviously comes with a little bit of challenges around this, including like the, Apple's contracts with the states and the local DMVs and how the administrative process is going to be on the DMVs. So if you've ever been to a DMV in the US, then you definitely know how exciting and fun that process tends to be. So there's probably a lot of key portions of the project that are TBD here on how that will work. But overall, I think this is a great, this is a great integration. This is something that we like. This is, less moving parts when you're going through TSA, especially if you're trying to go through like with a family or little ones, or, you've got just a lot of things that are happening. I mean, raise your hand if you've ever lost an ID going through a TSA checkpoint. I've definitely done that, and had to have my husband like overnight my passport, and when I'm traveling for work. So that is definitely not fun. And I think that this is a great, thing that can help streamline that and hopefully move those lines a little quicker. But what do you think?
Yeah, completely agree with everything you said. I think from a consumer traveler perspective, I think this is fantastic. It's all about taking the friction out of that sort of authentication process and whatnot. I think to add to what you've said though, I think the interesting part of this story for me is got nothing to do with Apple Wallet or the TSA. Is what does this mean for all those governments right now that we know who have huge sort of digital identity programs where they're building their own, sort of technology and building systems and so on. Does this sort of, throw a fly in that ointment, for them? Because I just look at it and go like, Apple's just making this available, Hyatt's using it, TSA is using it, the DMV is going to use it, whatever. If a bunch of more organizations start to say yes, this is easy, it's simple, people already have it in their phone, let's just go with that. I think there's hundreds of millions of dollars already allocated and half spent on all sorts of digital ID projects that are going on. Is that now all sort of wasted or have to just get thrown out, right? Because this is kind of the way that things are going. So I just worry about some of that, and I say that from even here in Ontario where I am. Our government has been working, for the last couple of years on a digital identity platform, which would incorporate our health information, our driver's license information, all of that into, some platform that they're building. But if that is now going to be easily available on, Apple Wallet, they've just spent like, years and hundreds of millions of dollars for nothing.
It's a good point, and it's certainly something to think about. I think it's really hard when it comes a lot of times to governments trying to build these types of platforms. I think that they have a harder time doing it. Their expertise typically lies elsewhere on some of these capabilities, although, there's a lot of government agencies that have the most advanced technologies as well. So I think it just depends on like what people will be willing to adopt from a consumer perspective, and then what governments are also going to be comfortable with in terms of interacting with some of these other very large, global companies. How does that impact their trustworthiness of things, especially when Apple will likely start working with multiple governments, around the world. So lots to consider there, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, let's jump over to our next story then, and we can talk a little bit about. We're going over to Europe here now, and this is an interesting project that's been launched by a company called Locatify. So Locatify is a European company. I think they've got offices in Amsterdam and Iceland, where they're based. And what they do is they use sort of real-time location information and data, indoor positioning data, GPS data, but they use this to sort of primarily focus on cultural markets, art galleries, museums, tours, these kinds of experiences, visitor experiences, let's call them, and then sort of build media intensive, location based, content based experiences, sort of tied to your geo position. And so, if you're inside of a building, obviously they're using, Wi-Fi or beacons. I know they even I've been playing around with ultra wideband a fair bit, on some new applications, and then obviously GPS and other signals in outdoor scenarios. So they've launched this program recently called Lifebouy Landshaft, which is a location-based audio walking app. This is happening in Switzerland, and it uses GPS marks to trigger audiovisual stories based on your surroundings. So, we've talked a lot about, over the years, and even recently, we've talked about sort of the growth of augmented reality and using that in sort of I'm standing in, this former, military battleground, or, this whatever. And, using AR, I can see, hold up my phone and there's a marker, and I can see kind of, what it might have looked like, 100 years ago or whatever in that spot. This is kind of the same thing, but using audio to deliver that message based on your GPS position. And so they've kind of built this whole audio tour, this walk, and you can kind of go around and experience, the landscape and this part of Zurich. And they've kind of got all these different markers there. It takes about 1.5 hours to complete the tour. It's available 24/7, so that's cool too, because it's not like something that staff have to be involved in, or you have additional costs that way. It's just there, and people can just download the app and kind of get going on it. So I love these kinds of things because I think they're, especially as we talked about at the opening of the show, we're still in COVID. What can you do to still have some fun, get out there? And this is the kind of thing that is very COVID friendly, right? I just go out there, I got the app, I'm on my own, I've got my headphones on, whatever, and I'm just experiencing things on my own, and learning about the place around me, or those kinds of things. So I really like these types of apps. But check out Locatify. They're a super interesting company. They've been at this for quite a while. As I said, indoor, museums, galleries, those kinds of things, as well as outdoor experiences all over the world, not just in Europe. I know they have quite a few implementations here in North America as well. Any thoughts from you?
No, I like this. I like that it is audio and location based, and there is, there's less of a need to engage or find a specific code or scan something. I can just be listening and walking and have somebody kind of guide me through what's going on. And I like that idea a lot. And I agree, I think there's a lot of opportunity to expand on these location based experiences. One thing we did early on in the Christmas break, because we all had a cold and we were like, we're not going to go to family's house or anything at this point. We're going to just kind of stay put, but we got to get out of the house, right? So we got in the car and we just drove around and looked at Christmas lights, and we were like, oh, there should be an app that should tell you like where the best Christmas lights are. And, we were trying to find, does that even exist? But this is kind of, that really high end blend of that, just saying like, here's where you are and here's what happened here, or this is what the painting is about, or, giving you like a glimpse from the artist's perspective. So I really love just the seamlessness of that, and bringing it into a lot of the other stories that we've talked about lately. So let's go over to Dublin, Ireland. A firm called Scentsy is really focused on empowering sustainability through technology. And specifically what they're looking at right now is trying to be part of a solution to the 8 million tons of plastic that enter our ocean every year, which is really sad and crazy that there's that much, plastic that's getting into our oceans. But there's a new law or directive that's coming into play specifically in Ireland that's called the Single-Use Plastics Directive, which is really aimed at trying to cut down on those plastic containers that are only intended to be used once. And so they're requiring that there's a separate collection of 90% of single-use plastic beverage bottles by 2029. And then for like 30% of such bottles to be recycled by 2030. So they're really, aiming at trying to help with this problem and, use the ability to recycle these types of things. So what Scentsy is doing is they are using this visual recognition AI technology with what they're calling smart RVMs, which is reverse vending machines, right? So instead of taking something out of this, you're putting something in. And this is part of what they're calling a deposit return scheme. Sure, they could come up with a better word than scheme for this, but the important part that we'll focus on is that this is, deposit return. So this could be used for applications within government or, private regulation type of things, private, companies. But they're really just encouraging like good recycling habits. So they're rewarding users with these digital vouchers in the form of QR codes. So they'll get something of value in return as they, go to these places and recycle, put in their plastic bottles. So they've already rolled this out in several locations across Ireland, including a premier retailer, which is called Fresh, and then a Pavilions shopping center in Swords, imports. And then there's a lot of companies that are supporting this initiative, like Dunn Store, Super Value, Chopped, and a whole bunch of others that are listed, and more are continuing to be onboarded with this. So I love this idea. I think it's very important, that we are having, visibility into what's happening in our world and in our environment. And I think maybe at least here in the US, I do feel like it's a very vague thing. Like, what happens when I actually recycle? Because we're big recyclers in my house. So like, what's happening with the cardboard and the plastic and the aluminum and everything that I'm putting, out, which accounts for a ton of the household trash. But it's like, it does take effort. There's a lot of sorting and cleaning and doing those things. So it would be really, I would love to know as a consumer, like, how am I helping? Like, what is this actually happening with these items that are being recycled, as well as what's happening with items that are not being recycled? What are the trickle down effects that this problem creates in our world? Because I think a lot of times, certain groups or perspectives are either it's not actually being recycled, or I don't believe in climate change or something like that, but they are not maybe understanding all of the implications that this problem is having, such as like, hey, this is getting in your food, and this is actually causing a lot of sickness and disease and things because of the trickle down effect. So I think that it's important that we have more visibility into the solutions, what they're helping with, all of those. And I love that this, company Scentsy is coming out and saying like, hey, we're going to help with this, and this is how we're going to do it, and we're going to reward consumers. So I would love to see more of that. And just, being able to kind of share. We've seen those experiences being shared around certain products, but like, what about our behavior as consumers and, as a global, humanity that drinks out of plastic and things almost every single day, right? Like, how can we help, and how can we know more? So I like it.
Yeah, I like it a lot too. So, couple thoughts on my side. So here in Canada, we just also passed. It was passed last year, but just came into effect on January 1st. Single-use plastics laws here. So now, like all the you go to any fast food restaurant or any place here, there's no more plastic straws. All that's gone now. It's all paper. Cutlery, all that. So all that's just gone, right? And so, I totally get kind of, that movement and where this is going, and kind of what they're striving for with this initiative. The thing I really like about it is when we think about sort of the world of retail and couponing and discounts and all of that kind of stuff, it's one thing to just like, hey, I walked by the store, or I got this coupon today. It's another thing to like, encourage people to be recycling and kind of putting something into a machine and then getting their discount or getting their coupon as the sort of reward, if you will, for it. And I just like that notion of it's back to that exchange, right? Like, I'm doing something and I'm getting something of benefit to me, right? And the thing I'm doing is actually very positive for our environment, and so that's really interesting for me, and I think too, like, potentially there's a data play here. We were talking the other week about sort of data for good kind of initiatives, right? And if there's any way at some point to sort of identify who these people are that are participating in this activity and receiving the reward, all of a sudden you have an interesting cohort that, from a marketing perspective, that could be useful, for certain brands and so on. So I think that is something I would be looking at, as a go forward piece around this. But just the whole notion of the reverse vending machine and that exchange, I really love. I could see this, exploding, into, retailers here in, where I am in Toronto or Canada, and many other markets. So I think this is the kind of thing that's really just at its infancy right now, and it's obviously not the first time we've seen a reverse vending machine, but I think at scale and with what's happening right now globally in terms of environmental consciousness and the need to recycle and tying that to rewards, I like it. So.
Yep.
All right, our final story now. So we're going to jump over to Indonesia, and talk a little bit about how one brand in particular has been engaging with citizens, around COVID and COVID pandemic awareness. And the brand is called Lifebouy. Now, for most of our North American viewers, you might not be familiar with Lifebouy, but Lifebouy is a brand that's been around for like 100 plus years, since 1894. It's a Lever Brothers brand, so it's actually part of the Unilever portfolio of brands. And this is a soap brand. So, when we're talking about COVID and cleanliness and washing your hands and using soap, that's the connection here to Lifebouy. And so they wanted to find a way to sort of create brand awareness and at the same time encourage people to be washing their hands and sort of being aware of what's going on, with the pandemic. And so they launched this sort of public awareness campaign across Indonesia, 17 countries, and focused on sort of the Indonesian market initially. And Indonesia is made up of many different provinces, like we have here in Canada. So you have Jakarta and Bali and so on and so forth. And then basically what was cool about this is they used real-time data coming from the health system to sort of understand, how the pandemic was sort of growing, in different provinces, in different cities at different rates, and the exposure and the number of cases and all those kinds of things. And then based on that data, they rolled out unique ads and message boards, based on 3 different themes: social distancing, hand washing, sort of measures and best practices, and then just overall COVID preparedness. And the ads were targeted to different audience segments. And then on top of all of that, they also donated 425 hand washing stations in key cities, in partnership with the National Disaster Management Association. So, it wasn't just, here's our brand and here's our ad campaign, tied to real-time data. It's also, hey, we want to help, we're, making hand washing stations available, and doing all of that. And then to kind of sum up here, the last thing I want to say is that, all the ads were customized based on, these sort of dynamic, data elements to each province and the number of cases, as I said, and those kinds of things. But in addition to that, what I liked about it, they actually did have a call to action at some point in this, right, where you could, sort of click on the ad and then go and buy Lifebouy soap or products, to help you with, staying on top of, hand washing and cleanliness. So it wasn't just brand awareness. They actually did have a call to action and actually, try to drive, some incremental, revenue from this, which, they should be doing. They're commercial products. So I think it's pretty interesting. And, we actually have, it's interesting because I haven't heard of a lot of brands really tapping into, sort of real-time COVID data and then trying to push more, sort of product related to that. Maybe there's still a lot of opportunity because we're still in this. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
No, I completely agree. I think I do like their incorporation of the data and application there. Early on, we saw a lot of location data providers sharing this type of movement data, talking about it, but it wasn't really being applied where you can see, okay, this is something that could easily be applied to companies like Instacart or Drizzly or whoever, that has any type of delivery application, or in this case, an actual good, that can be tied in. So I love the charitable aspect of it. I love the real-time data. I love that there was a call to action. I think they checked all the boxes on this campaign. And yeah, I think it's a really great campaign that they put together. Pretty strong.
Yeah, and just to give you some numbers, like on reach here, so they said the ad campaign, they reached more than 6 million local Indonesians with 10 million completed video views, and that they increased their brand internet footprint with more than 1 million visits to their page after the campaign. And to top it off, like the good news story is 4 of the provinces that they focused on saw a week over week decline in COVID cases. So
There you go.
There you go. So effective all around, it sounds like. So I like it.
Me too.
So that's it. That's our show for this week. You've been listening and watching episode number 550 of Location Weekly. We thank you so much for your time. And we just wish you a good start to the new year, a healthy one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Wear your mask, wash your hands, get some soap, and have a good week. And we'll see you next week.